What's up, guys? Jordan from Bennett's Customs. We're back on another episode, wrapping up that transmission tunnel and the firewall recess in the Hemi Coupe. There's going to be a whole ton of information in this video around welding in these panels and welding thin sheet metal. Smooth it out a little bit. If you guys are interested in honing in the skills in order to be welding thin sheet metal and kind of everything that happens right around that, be sure to check the metal shaping course link below. The wait list is open, so please, if you are interested, put your email down. But anyways, back to this. We are going to be getting straight into this, lifting the body up onto the fab table and getting all those three components of that transmission tunnel and that firewall recess all connected as one. And then we're gonna weld it all in, be able to look at that beautiful front firewall, and then getting the shifter mechanism all hooked up and operational. So lots to do in this video. Let's get straight into it. All right, so you can see we've just got everything clecoed in, and the biggest thing before welding, obviously you can see we have the shifter in here, and that was to make this all work. So now we have a full operating shifter that goes through all the gears. And underneath, obviously, we welded some square stainless nuts to the bottom side of this so that these are threaded. Let's step straight into getting this guy fully welded in. So I'm gonna remove this now, now that we know that we're happy with it. And we are ready to almost get everything fully scribed, cut, and welded in. So we're actually gonna pull the body back off the frame rails just to make it easier for me to weld that front firewall section. So we'll be able to get it right up onto the fab table, and then that way we can hammer and dolly those areas out. But basically what I'd like to do is first off get this out, and then I'm gonna try and tack this guy to this piece, and then I can actually run a weld directly across where our top distributor kind of bubble is to the transmission tunnel, and I can just weld that right across, finish it, make it look nice. Then this whole piece is going to be one piece that we're going to then slide in, cleco it into place, scribe it all. This is going to get plug welded. This is going to get butt welded from kind of the kick panel all the way around, and make it, you know, look like a seamless piece from the front. So once you look behind that motor, you'll just see a nice cove for where the distributor is going to go. Biggest thing when I'm running kind of thinner sheet metal is I love to use a 1.6 tungsten. Sometimes I use a 2.4, but usually if it's kind of 16 gauge or, you know, 16 to 20 gauge, if I'm running some thin sheet metal like that, I'll always run a 1.6 tungsten, just a little bit more controlled. Don't necessarily have to put a lot of heat into it. Filler rod again, 1.6 I'll sometimes use. If you do use 1.6 when you're using, say like 16 up to 20 gauge, you may have to just add a few more amps sometimes, whether, you know, versus if you run like 030 or 032 MIG wire. I use this more often than I would use the 1.6, and that doesn't require as much heat to melt into what you're using. So I definitely, you know, I'm partial to using MIG wire for sure. Cleanliness is godliness, say it a lot of times, but just making sure everything is clean. Really making sure that your filler rod's clean. It may look clean. You may go like that with your fingers and there's nothing on it, but you got oil on your fingers that's contaminated. And using just like acetone or methyl hydrates works really well multiple times. Even like a red Scotch-Brite, if you really wanted to, and then using the metho can really make sure it's clean. That's more or less if I'm welding like stainless, because stainless likes to be very, very clean. But I like to, you know, apply the same rules to using mild steel as well, just to make sure that it's kind of like a habit that always is used. So I want to try and get a few tacks along here. There's a small bit of a gap, but if I press in on it, it kind of sits nicely against the firewall. I don't know, sometimes I guess I'm going against like the rules where, you know, you don't really want to trap a weld, especially if you're going to try and hammer it out, but there's not really a whole lot of hammering here because we're actually, you know, this is kind of not a flat joint that we're welding here. It's got a lot of curve to it. Let's try and get a few tacks on here, and then we can kind of get this out, weld this piece in, and then we'll reinstall it to scribe all of our lines. What I did here too, sometimes this works really well when welding aluminum, is I just put a tiny little ball of filler rod on one of the materials, not both. It's still movable, but it's just sitting there. That way, if I'm kind of utilizing my hand to hold something, or if I'm kind of handless, I'll call it, I only got one to use the torch with me applying a little bit of pressure to get that weld, I can actually use that as kind of like a little bit of a pool or a bit of filler. So it's just a little bit easier to attach those two metals versus having no filler rod in there and hoping to try and fuse them. You know, it's a bit of an easy little tip. It works sometimes in certain applications, more or less with welding aluminum. But yeah, just another little helpful tip if that ever works for you guys in an application. Didn't work. Yep, that's it.
All right, ready?
Yeah. Okay. Beautiful.
You got me acting out. You, all tenderness is out the window. What you do to me when the cold bites blue is straight cruel. Oh, it has to be you leaving writings on the wall. You promised me roses and hungry heads, but now there's only madness. Got me feeling dusty. Got me feeling dusty. I can't even whisper in. It's hard to see. Don't take my hand away from me.
All right, so I'm pulling it out and I'm gonna try and weld it. If I could get in a better position, I'd probably try and weld the majority of it in place so that it's kind of in the natural position where it's gonna go. So when it cools down, it cools where I want it to go. So we're gonna take a little bit of a gamble on actually pulling it out, but I will just try and clamp it to the table so it doesn't have a whole lot of room to move. And then while we have it out, I'm gonna drill a series of holes along here, and those holes will get plug welded just the same way we've done it here as well. So this guy is not going to get flush mounted. It's not really necessary. Again, this whole entire system is going to be welded in. It's not going to be a removable transmission tunnel. Although the idea of it right now, just drilling and making it removable, sounds amazing. So I don't have to weld it. So MIG wire, obviously because it comes off a big spool, it's naturally going to kind of have a curve to it. So rather than sitting there with your hands, we just pinch an end. I stick that part in the chuck. Watch your eyeballs. And then I just stick the other end in the vise that's terribly placed. And then all you do is spin this. Release the chuck, and it comes out dead straight. So it does take a little bit of time to do multiple ones, but you know, in preparation for a really big weld, say when we go to do this roof insert, I'll just make multiple of these, have them sort of ready, have them all cleaned obviously, and then you know, we can kind of use these. So it just makes it a little bit easier having them straight rather than curved. Sometimes the curve will kind of bite you when you're trying to obviously dab it where you want it. So makes it a bit easier. Tacks on here that I'd like to just kind of knock down before I go and do a full pass over it all. So just a couple, I'm just gonna kiss them and blend them in. All right, so we were able to burn that right through. And you can see I basically started from one end and went all the way out of there because I knew I was going to try and hammer and dolly it out a little bit, just try and kind of smooth that weld out. And I just did that by obviously hitting on this end over top of just a small T-dolly and just kind of worked it. But what I am gonna do is just try and blend a bit of this weld now that I've kind of hammered it out where I like it. It feels really nice. There's no real low spots that I can feel. It's quite consistent. So I may just grab our little blending octagon sanding discs here, just give it a kiss on both sides, and then we can kind of go back to the square ones and then just sand it out. All right, so there we have kind of a finished piece. Well, as finished as not welded into the car, but as you know, from wire back to paper templates through the various episodes that we've gone through with creating this thing, like I'm really pleased with kind of the overall shape of it and how it's all come together. It looks really cool, kind of inside and outside. Yeah, it looks really good. And I think now what I want to do is just bang a few holes all around here, and those holes are going to be so that we can plug weld them. So that'll actually be welded to the floor. And then here, we're going to put a scribe line all the way around and actually cut that firewall section out. So I kind of considered like just plug welding the whole lot, and I don't know, like bringing the firewall sort of section kind of to there. And then, you know, like we could just like body work that area and you would never even know and see it. and it would be so much easier. But I'm thinking it's going to be nicer to have it sort of as one piece. But you know, having said that, there's no reason why you couldn't just drill holes all the way around this, sit it in, and then plug weld them all. So it's definitely a consideration I've been thinking about. Whether or not I do it, you'll have to continue to watch and see. This thing just works really well for punching holes. Don't actually know the size of them, but it's like a little flanging tool. This, you could put flat steel in it. It kind of gives you like this little step. I've never really used it for that, but I do like to use this. It just kind of saves you having to drill, and they're always clean. There's no burr on the other side. So kind of a perfect size for plug welding. I don't think you'd get away with punching, you know, anything more than 16 gauge. You could, but I'm just using this Sharpie as an area where I can see where I need to scribe, because we're going to be eliminating a lot of this portion. And then we're going to have to try and trim it in here too, which is going to be really difficult. I just kind of thought of that. One, distributor's right here. Two, getting kind of underneath. This is like the tunnel where all the wiring would have originally came down, because this is the old fuel tank that will be utilized again. She's very warm today. It's real muggy, so the workshop have the doors down to try and keep the heat or the sunshine coming in, but inside this nice little coupe is well and truly toasty. We're just going to run using our little scribe here, and we're just going to scribe along. It's a little down.
Someday you'll come running, somehow rivers calling, you'll see I'll be longing, I'm free. Come hell or high water, I'm gonna make you love me. Come hell or high water, I'll bring your blue skies down.
All right, so we got it fitted in, kind of loosely clamped, and I'm happy with the shape. There's a little bit of that area that I kind of mentioned. You can actually see there's a line that goes straight through here in the firewall, and that's where it starts to come this way. So I'm gonna try and weld up to there, and then I'm just gonna try and kind of hammer and dolly that back to get that seam sort of lined up. And the good thing is we should be able to get it. So again, you know, with anything like this, fitment is obviously key. So that's why, you know, you kind of saw me in there. Obviously, you guys probably cringed a little bit because I was in such a tight spot trying to use like the angle grinder and stuff. And it definitely wasn't ideal, but we were able to, you know, trim out. And then I just came in there with a flap disc. I used a hand file and I just creeped up to that scribe edge. And then once we kind of touched the scribe line, I know that that's exactly where this is going to fit. So you can see that there's like a bit of a gap here, and that's going to close up. Like we can kind of pull these together, and once we tack that, that tack's going to shrink, and that's going to bring the panels closer together. So we know that once they're actually all kind of put in, we're going to start from one end and kind of try and work our way around if we can. Ideally, I'd like to kind of work from the top and work down, but I do really want these kind of like where the brake is in this firewall where it transitions down into the kick panel. I want these to line up really well, and we have really good fitment with the Clecos kind of holding everything together here. So I want to try and get a few tacks on this bit here, and then we're just going to work our way around. Reason why I'm doing this first before plug welding the floors, I just want a little bit of movement. Even if that was plug welded, we kind of still get the same amount, but it's just to kind of finesse and tweak. This is very important to make sure that we get this fitting really well. Again, prep's always key too. So if you look over here, I have a bunch of filler rods that I just made this morning. And then I got a few tungstens that are all pre-sharpened, plus the one inside the torch head itself. So that just kind of helps with, you know, when you're getting comfortable, you don't have to keep getting up, which you see me do a lot of the times when I'm grinding that tungsten. So I feel like I'm pretty prepped. Everything's clean. It is the morning after, so it's not as hot. And it's funny, like you can see a lot of this surface rust is due to me obviously sweating and the oil's coming out of my skin. You know, the salt water is obviously going to majorly affect the sheet metal, so it kind of like flash rusts and you get that surface on there. So again, you want to make sure that everything is clean prior to welding, but other than that, I reckon we should just start the torch up and start tacking this puppy in. Hole. Obviously, as explaining, like fitment is key, and there were probably a couple areas where you know, it was difficult to really get that clean scribe. So you can see in this area here, you know, we're about the thickness of our filler rod, which is 030. And that's probably a little bit like, you know, that's probably max. That's almost a pain in the butt to try and weld. So I'll have to do some pretty close tacks in order to sort of close that up. You really want your fitment to be like a lot better than that. So that's a good example of what not to do. But I'm happy to kind of admit, you know, whether or not everything kind of just sort of relaxed a little bit, or maybe we just had a bit too much pressure on that tunnel when we had it in and had the Clecos holding it in, and then once we scribed and pulled it off and then obviously trimmed this out, then there's nothing to kind of hold it tight together anymore. So it's kind of, you know, relaxed sort of to its natural state. Even in here, I'll probably have to actually tack here and then kind of hammer and dolly it out to open up the tack a little bit, because it is pretty close to being almost like too much, where you get too much pressure and you want to sort of relax that and add like a small amount of gap. So it's just like, yeah, take your time. I'm just gonna try and get this guy here, then I can hammer it out. Grab the hammer dolly. It's too tight. So I'm gonna hammer this tack. I can even come back to this guy if I have to, but I'm gonna hammer him up to stretch it, and then that should hopefully relax. Move him. Luckily, I have a little bit of room to get in here, but not a lot. And you can see now that that's opened that right up. Clamp it in and it's way better than it was. So now we can kind of, again, tack that guy, hammer him out if need be. And we're just gonna try and work our way up into this area. I may, depending on how we go, I may kind of go against what I say, and rather than starting from one end and working your way, I might go over here and close this area in, and then we're gonna try and work out what to do there. But that's purely just a little bit of an error, not really taking into consideration that that's also super difficult to try and do while tipping it. You know, a lot of guys too have mentioned multiple times, almost every video, about me not wearing gloves when I'm welding or wearing long sleeves and the proper protection. And I do totally agree. I'm not opposed to it one bit. I think sometimes there's nothing like feel than the real feel, you know what I mean? So there's no layer between your hand and the steel, which means there's nothing to interfere with the way that the fitment is. So if I had like a glove on and I'm trying to do this, I might not be able to feel it as well as if I don't. Same thing when you're doing body work. Lots of guys love to wear like latex gloves, which works because they still are able to kind of feel any of those, like, you know, highs and lows. But same thing with this is if I have my welding gloves on and I kind of go through and feel it, I'm not really that, you know, happy with it. Once I go to do the final weld, then yeah, definitely I'll put my gloves on and work through. But, you know, take it as you want, be safe as you want, but it is a good little reminder, I suppose. So I'm using this little pick and I'm kind of putting it in the back and sort of making sure I can get it so that they're dead flush, and it's working really well. You can see that that is a pretty large gap though. So unfortunately, I think what I should have done is try and tack up here first so that it would have pulled it up. Although my lines I could have kind of just hammered these out a little bit to make them fit better, but I'm gonna have to deal with this. So it's not bad though, like I'll totally be able to work with this. I just gotta really take my time when I'm welding it. And by that I mean still trying to keep a nice consistent flow right across, but also just getting your tacks really close. And then, you know, we'll kind of come over and kiss those with the grinder. And then we can kind of come in and just smooth everything out, hammer and dolly doll, just so it's all the same plane. And then we can fully weld it. So I'm just using this little guy, again, just to kind of get it to fit. You know, you can just kind of go like this and I can feel with my finger, like right there, spot on. If I were to release it, this is just a little bit proud. So I just kind of stick it in there until I find the spot that I like. And then I just use my other hand right there, and then I'll just use them from filler rod. And I am using 1.6 filler rod just because I'm trying to zap it right into the gap without putting too much heat into it. And you can see by doing that, it just allows you to get a nice little low tack without putting too much heat in. And you kind of just sit it right in between there and then give it a good zap. So I'm really liking the way that this is coming out now. I was a little bit worried. I need some longer C-clamps, or I need to cut mine and weld some flat bar into them so that they can be mega extendo. All right, so we got a few tacks on there, holding everything into place. I'm just gonna kiss a couple of these with our little grinding wheel. And then I just wanna come in, I'm gonna try and reach up there with the hammer and dolly and just kinda smooth it out a little bit, get it to where it's in a really nice position. Then we'll probably come in. I might even try and tack between all these ones here, and then we'll smooth all those out. And then we're gonna come through and do a final weld from one end all the way over, and then we can hammer that out. So a few different steps, but I wanna get a few closer tacks in between these areas where we have a considerable gap. That's like, 1.6 right off the bat. I can see it, like a piece of filler rod will sit right in there. So, I was explaining heavily about fitment. This was kind of a tricky one to do with the flange and the setup of the firewall, but I think once we actually have it all welded and smoothed out, it's gonna be fine. So I just wanna get a couple of these guys, and then we're gonna hammer them out. Okay, well, I've just kind of dressed those top tacks, and then I've just hit it with the 80 grit it kind of like almost gives you an area where your high and lows are, and it just gives you a bit more of an indication of how your fitment is. So obviously you can see up here, as I explained before, we do have a little bit of filler to apply, and then down in here would be a prime example of how you'd like it to fit. Where we have a tack, and then it's just like a little line, and then a tack and a little line. So this is okay though. I'll be able to weld it. It's just gonna take me a little bit. Up here, I may even transfer from the 030 to the 1.6, and then come back down. I'll be able to kind of do what I can there. So I've kind of mentioned it quite a few times. In this instance, it's not really gonna help me, but always doing sort of like a dry pass, I'll call it. And that just means like, how are you going to, be moving your hand? Are you going to have something to slide on your glove? are you in any way or going to be kind of like, intruding by, like being intruded by something? Is there something you're going to hit or whatever? But as long as you can get kind of a consistent all the way around with no hindering by anything, that's just like the best way to kind of go about it. So you want to get really comfortable. Luckily, we have these computer chairs in here, and I can actually sit, and they're great because they have a lot of adjustment. So even in this top bit, I can kind of lean right back and still be supported. But let's have a crack at trying to get this welded up. There's definitely going to be a few burn throughs, but I already know that, so it's not going to be any surprise. And yeah, we may change over to that 1.6 filler rod, but I'm just going to see how much I can get with this guy. So. We'll just see how much more I can go. I may actually change now and see how the 1.6 goes. All right, so we got it welded in. Wasn't too difficult. As you can see by where the heat registering is, that's kind of the multiple stops I had to do. So this one, I was able to get it right to about here, and then there, had a little burn through there. Obviously, kind of an awkward position. Maybe, yeah, I don't know how I would have set it up any different. It was just the way that it's set up on the table, and obviously sitting where it's nice and flat, which was good. So I am just going to just knock a bit of this. I'm just going to hammer a little bit of it out, and then I'll end up getting the grinder out and just grinding a little bit of the weld back, and then again come through and hammer it out. Warpage wise, it's actually not too bad. This area is really good, but this is also because we have a very sharp bead right here. So, and there's so much form in this that it's going to be really difficult for that to really want to warp. Again, just try and, match your die to the shape that you want to try and create. I'm just kind of going through multiple different style dollies to try and make it work. This is actually one from the Noisy Boy from the planishing hammer. I'm just using that as a bit of a backer in certain areas just to kind of get me up into position. And then when you are obviously grinding your weld, you want to try and grind just the weld. You don't want to grind the material beside it, because then that's just going to take away material that doesn't need to be taken away.
what I've done in here is I've just sprayed a bit of anti-spatter spray, and that just helps the amount of slag that comes off the MIG welder. Those little balls, they usually can stick, and I don't want that. I want it to be really clean. It also just kind of helps it. So I've just got the welder set up, and all we're gonna do is just kind of work around our areas, you know, where we got it really nice and tight. I'll just spot weld that one, and we're just gonna, all we're doing is spot welding where the hole is to the floor underneath. That way everything is kind of, you know, where it should be.
All right, so as you can see, I've just bolted the shifter back in. Does everything it's supposed to. Looks really nice, kind of, you know, enough ample amount of space around the dash for the gauges. There is a little bit of adjustment there just in case. But I'm super stoked with how it's come out, and it's made it like really rigid, which is amazing. So, you know, from kind of just plug welding this top bit all the way around, similar to what we did to that subframe that we made underneath, you know, and then being able to tie it all in and hammer it around the firewall. There's perfect amount of clearance for the distributor for that vacuum advance to sort of be able to kind of clear the firewall now. And just, it really looks the part. And like, as you can see through those 3 videos, you know, like it's a lot of work involved in order to make these custom pieces. So from, you know, the basics of building that wire buck to then using our paper templates, the tape templates, transferring them to our steel, and then obviously making 3-dimensional objects. It's, you can see it's not like a, you know, a day's work. It definitely takes a lot to do. So I'm really happy. Now that I have it in, we got a little bit of an area here where I can start to work out how we're gonna make our kickboards. That's just a huge major component of this build, sort of ticked off the list. So I'm very pleased with how it's turned out. And I'm kind of already really excited to start building these pieces. And, you know, like, I wanna be able to fix those really neat aluminum kind of casted pieces that you've seen me make. And if you haven't, definitely check that video out. That was a lot of fun creating those little kind of feature pieces for the front of the firewall to frame piece. So we're gonna have those sort of connecting through into here. So, you know, they're gonna look the part, but they're actually kind of like a component that's functional, which will be really cool. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed that video. I'm stoked. Yeah, hopefully you guys are as stoked as I am. So just another part ticked off, moving right on. We're gonna be creating obviously the kick panels, or the sort of floorboard area there. Once that's finished, we're gonna go into the back. We're gonna start to get that dicky seat or rumble seat set up and working, and then building the custom struts for all that as well. We do need to put a few like pieces to kind of structurally, make this thing tight and strong. And then once that's kind of fitted and finished, then we're going to be working up into the actual panel here. So we got, obviously a big void that's up here. It will still continue to stay open. We are going to use the factory wood kit, but we are going to do sort of like a 32 style insert. So I'll be making another set of dies that we will be running through the power hammer and making sort of like a little insert that we can weld into this whole floor, getting the header panel sort of fixed straight into it. So we still got a lot of work to do, but that's going to be kind of like, the majority of it finished off. And then again, we do have to reskin these doors. Once those are skinned, then like a lot of the major fabrication is going to be sort of finished off, which is going to be really exciting because that means we're a step closer to getting this into paint and body. So, that's going to be huge. So, yeah, keep following along with the Hemi Coupe build. Lots more to come very soon. We're going to be lots of fab work still to do. So, I want to keep this momentum going on this one. But, anyways, make sure you guys like, subscribe, hit notifications, and we'll see you next week on Bennett's Customs. Thanks, guys.